folks. Welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hamlin. I'm the editor of Wetpixel. And we'd like to thank Aquatica for sponsoring this episode. Aquatica do a wide range of housing, supports, arms and accessories. You can see them at aquatica.ca. They're proudly based in Canada, and so their website is aquatica.ca. I'm joined today by my friend Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Adam. Nice to see you. Good to be here.
Nice to see you too. It's a busy time of the year for underwater photographers. Obviously, with some of the major competitions now calling for results. So I think we're all pouring through our image libraries trying to figure out.
Wishing we'd done more photography.
Yeah, wishing we spent more time listening to other people and making sure we got good pictures. Anyway, and I figured I'd ask Alex for his tips. Obviously, the Wildlife Photographer of the Year results came out recently, and I thought I'd ask him for his tips for entering wildlife photographer and other underwater photography competitions.
Well, yeah, because we have both UPY and this year, the Wetpixel Dive Photo Guide Masters as well is overlapping with the other two as well. So there's lots of entries for people to be sorting out and getting themselves together for.
Yeah.
I think it's I think I'm interested always in thinking a little bit about the judges, and I think particularly the contrast or the differences between the wildlife photographer and the other competitions.
Yep.
And I think that's probably the area I probably want to talk about the most. In that, what you have to remember about the wildlife photographer is they maybe have underwater photographers on the judging panel, but not every year, and often quite focused wildlife photographers who are only interested in a particular area and don't have a particularly broad view of wildlife, of underwater photography. So, it's a competition that's judged by editors, by scientists, by photographers, and occasionally underwater photographers. And I think you need to think carefully about your entries. In my approach to it is, the first thing I say is I always enter what I want to enter. I don't try to. I think I always, good advice is to enter what you have. That's maybe a little different from what everyone else has.
Yeah.
And to try to pick entries that you think could have a reason why they could do well. And I would say if I enter, a dozen or 15 entries, each one of them, I think I would have a reason why I'm entering it. This is not just this is a good picture, but this could do well because it fits that category. Yeah. We've done many commentary videos now on the wildlife photographer, and one thing we say a lot is that in the underwater category, they like that otherworldly feel. They like, something looking alien or something looking like it comes from a completely different place. A feeling of being underwater often, and I think pictures in that vein tend to do well. Yeah. Pictures that you wouldn't get on land, which I know sounds silly, of course you wouldn't, but actually pictures that surprise non-underwater photographers. I think that the sorts of pictures that do well in underwater photography competitions, which often are high impact, dominant subject, beautiful lighting, are maybe a little bit unsubtle for the wildlife photographer.
Yeah.
And so some of those shots that some of us enter maybe aren't the right ones to put into that competition. And that's something to consider, is that there are different places, different competitions for different types of shots. I always pay attention to the fact that the underwater category isn't the only place for underwater pictures in the wildlife photographer. I think the underwater category is one of the smaller categories. Yep. So it is one of the categories that's probably easier to have success in because, because of that. However, I think that you have to remember that underwater pictures can do well in other categories. Yep. Now, I know that, the last 2 years, I think underwater pictures have done really well outside the underwater category. And I do think probably there'll be a year when the judging panel will be like, oh, we've had a few too many underwater winners outside the underwater category. Let's rein it back in. Let's not have all the categories have it. So, there might well be a time when there's a bit of negativity about that. I've also taken the opinion that I look at the previous year's results and try and avoid repeating them in my entries. Yeah. Now, I have to say, as we've commented as well in our discussion videos down the years, that actually I'm not sure that has big impact.
Yep.
I think that, the number of times, for example, that Blackwater pictures were awarded year after year, despite them being essentially very similar shots, and it seemed to have no impact on the judges because in reality, most of the judging panel changes each year.
Yep.
Is probably is probably suggests that's not an issue. I also, if a non-underwater category is won by an underwater image one year, I think it lessens your chances of an underwater image placing in that category the following year.
Yep.
So I've often avoided doing that. But again, that rule can be bent and broken as well. So I think sorry.
I think I think one of the things that we need to be very cognizant of with wildlife photography is when you've got a judging panel that are not underwater photographers, and to be fair, this would apply to other general photography competitions as well. Most of the context that we have with our underwater images falls away. So as underwater photographers, we understand the difficulty, the scarcity, the rarity, all these things of a particular series of images, and that influences us when we judge underwater photography competitions as underwater photographers. But when you've got a bunch of photographers that have no concept of that, it basically opens the door to a much wider range of images being evaluated. There's no idea that you've been somewhere incredibly remote and had a terrible time getting this amazing image, and there's simply no awareness of that, or there's probably much less awareness of that. And that's why I think this is where this idea of looking for difference, looking for subjects that possibly aren't the classic underwater photography subjects, and the classic kind of. I was thinking, as we were talking, I was thinking about Tony Rue's images of the sperm whales in Dominican, and I think part of the reason why they did so well, not only are they very beautiful, but they were also, that incredible. They were sleeping. I think they were 12 or 13 and sleeping vertically as they do, and it had that incredible, almost alien atmosphere to it that I think made it such a crowd pleaser for the judges. And I think that's the kind of image you want to be thinking about, rather than an upfront picture of a sperm whale eating a piece of squid or whatever. And I think that's going to be much less interesting to the wildlife photographer judges. That's my kind of gut feeling.
One theme that I've had a lot of success in that competition down the years. The first thing I would say is, although more often than not I get pictures placed in that competition each year, that represents a relatively smaller proportion of my entry. And that's true of all the photographers. Don't think that the big name photographers that you see picking up prizes have just entered one picture. They've entered 12, 14, 18, 20 pictures, and 12, 14, or 11, 13, 17, 19 images of theirs weren't awarded. So so everyone is a loser in terms of their main entry. Most of our pictures lose, and only a few of them go through. Something that has united, though, a lot of my winning pictures in the wildlife photographer is a lot of them have been linked to technical innovations. I've had pictures. Sorry, I think I was one of the first photographers, underwater or above water, to have a picture taken with a Micro Four Thirds camera awarded in the wildlife photographer. When we were testing on the Wetpixel trip, the prototype Nauticam SMC, I got a picture with that and entered it straight away into the wildlife photographer, and that was the highest magnification underwater picture I'd taken to that point with that quality, and that picture was awarded at a time when no one else had that capability. I've had pictures awarded with my Zeiss corrector port that no one else has. I've had 2 pictures awarded with WACP. That's pushing boundaries back. I've had pictures awarded with the Trioplan lens in the wildlife photographer, and all those things are not obvious to the judges. But the judges clearly recognize pictures that offer them something visually they've not seen before, and I think the freshness of the images created by those lenses has definitely allowed those shots to stand out, even when even though they wouldn't be able to say why they reacted to them in terms of saying, oh yeah, we can tell this is done with a new lens. It's just like the freshness of perspective of using those those cutting edge innovations has enabled the picture. So I do think that pictures that it's not that it's necessarily obvious to the judges. They just respond to the fact, here's something we've not seen before. And that certainly is something that I think is important.
And I think the other thing that stands out in wildlife photography of the year is, you all know the number, Alex. It's 50,000 entries. How many is it? So there's this massive volume of entries that gets whittled down very rapidly into the finalists, or gets whittled down. I don't know how rapidly it is, but the idea is that if your image is different in some way, be that quirky, technically different, it stands a much better chance of making it through what is at the end of the day, that's still it's 50,000 people's best images. It's a big hill to climb.
Well, and also, you start thinking of the number of photographers who deserve to win these things each year, and you end up with a far longer list than there are spaces for them to win.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, really incredible photographers who maybe have taken, 20 or 30 amazing images that year, may not get any of them awarded. So there is a big loss. I think the other factor of having so many images, though, is that the images unnaturally go through multiple rounds of judging, because you can't get from 50,000 to 1 in one round of judging. And so images with subtle details have a chance to shine.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of underwater photography competitions, there's often a big cull and then a final decision. And then the better competitions have multiple culls and then a final decision.
Yeah.
And I think that in those cases, a simple image has got more chance of standing out. Whereas when you have a really big field, actually it's images that have got subtlety to them actually have a chance. Now, they may well get culled in an early round and not get the chance, but if you can get your subtle image through the early rounds, then actually it can start to have its head against images that perhaps were initially very appealing to the judges. And then when they've seen them 5-10 times, they're like, yeah, it's losing a bit of impact for me now. It's not giving me anything new each time I visit it. It's the same image again. So,
and I think that's possibly that's one thing that this is moving more probably from wildlife photography specifically, but more into general kind of one of the things that I think if you've got an image that every time you look at it you see something different, I think that's probably a good starting point to think of. If you start recognizing shapes or different creatures or different poses within the image. And I think you've frozen, Alex. Are you there? Hello, Alex. I'm going to pause it. Right. Rolling.
I think another factor that's important to remember with the wildlife photographer is that the judges do change every year. And this year, the chair of the judges has changed. So it's a real kind of reset.
Yeah.
So more than ever, it's well worth re-entering old pictures or pictures that you've tried before and haven't had success, but you feel are deserving of success. Yeah. Now, I would go against that by saying I've never, despite all the success I've had in the competition, I've never had success with a re-entered picture. All my pictures that I've placed have always placed the first year I've entered them.
Okay.
But I know one photographer who was the overall winner of the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and he said that certainly one of his pictures that have been awarded there, he'd tried at least 3 times before. I don't think it was the picture that was the overall winner, but it was one that was when it was finally awarded.
Of that series.
It was, it had been in at least 3 times before and never awarded. So there's no harm in that. I think another thing that photographers are terrified of is sharing their images online and then going, oh, it's been online, it can't possibly win. Yeah. That's, again, total rubbish. You only have to look at all the competitions out there, particularly in underwater photography, that all award the same pictures again and again. Yep. And they've been in 4 or 5 competitions before, and you're worried them about being on your small social media account.
Yeah,
so, don't worry about not entering pictures that have been online. I have to say that it's really cool to win in those competitions with a picture that no one's ever seen, because it's kind of nice to be able to go, and I had this up my sleeve that you never knew about. But beyond that showing off factor, that you don't lose out by sharing your pictures on social media first. I'm certain none of the judges are looking at your social media.
We were harking back to this idea of subtlety a few points ago, and I thought I'd just return to that for a minute because I think that's something that's probably when people are selecting images for competitions. And this is not just for wildlife photography. This could be for the underwater photography of the year, or for the DPG Wetpixel Masters, whichever. And I always think that if you've got an image that every time you look at it you see something different, I think that's a really good way of assessing images for whether they're going to do well in competitions. Because as you say, what happens in a judging process is, each image gets examined numerous times, and if each time the judge goes, "Oh yeah, I hadn't seen that," "Oh yeah, I've seen that," that will keep them engaged. If you've got an in-your-face, center of the frame, wham, and yeah, okay, it's probably got a huge amount of impact, maybe beautifully shot, but it's probably a one-trick pony. Probably that's it. People look at it and go, "Oh, that's quite something," and it knocked me off my seat the first time I looked at it. By the fifth time I looked at it, I got used to it, and it no longer has that impact. Whereas if they're going, "Oh yeah, look, there's a seagull up there," or whatever the creative tool that you use is, I think that's often a good sign of an image that will do well in competitions.
Yeah, yeah. I'd agree with that, particularly the bigger competitions with the multiple rounds of judging.
Yeah.
I think, and it's something to watch, because some of the underwater competitions that purport to be very big have multiple categories, and within those multiple categories, actually they're quite small, and they're quite often just culled down to finalists and then the winners picked, and you don't have that multiple rounds. But I think certainly, the way we judge UPY is you have the same few judges looking at the pictures the whole way through, so you do have that multiple round experience. Where and it comes back to the point I made very early on, which is think about the judges, think about the judging process, and have a reason for entering your shot. Not just this one was, I've always wanted to get a shot of one of these, I'm going to put it in the competition, but actually go, well, this one might appeal because of this. This one could work well because of that. And I think that helps you narrow down what to enter.
I think we're again sort of capitalizing on the differences between the underwater specific competitions and the wildlife competition. I think it's important to bear in mind that your image, that you should really probably be selecting different images for these competitions. So I think one of the temptations people do is they grab their 10 or 20 best images that they've shot in the past, whatever, edit them and enter them into the same lot into multiple competitions. I think that's a huge mistake. I think you really, really want to be tailoring your offering to the type of competition that it is. And each competition, is subtly different, judging, what they want out of it. And I think, if you're entering the same images over and over, you're probably limiting yourself. I think you probably want to be looking at a different sample for each competition.
Yeah, and certainly in UPY, we have always been quite strict on downgrading images that we've seen before. And I know you see loads of competitions during the year, and a lot of competitions that a lot of competitors comment that UPY is often the start of the season, and they enter their shots in UPY, and then they'll enter their UPY winners into future competitions through the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I would say we definitely within UPY pay attention to other competition results, and pictures that we've seen during the rounds are far less likely to do well, because we know that we'll keep getting fresh images if we keep awarding them, and every time we award a picture that you've seen before as a competitor, it encourages someone else to enter an old picture.
And I mean, you've got to watch, but there could be rules this year as well. So competitions actually won't allow. We don't allow images that have won in a major competition to be awarded. So as long as it's by the date. I mean, you've got to watch the rules and make sure that your images that you're entering haven't won elsewhere and inadvertently falling foul of the rules.
Yeah. So UPY, we don't have the strict rule, but we're probably stricter on it in that, and also because we don't have a cutoff date, it's not like, oh, this one gets in because it wasn't a major competition, or it was after the date. We're very much, if we've seen it, we don't like it,
Yeah, which can be a problem actually. I mean, the strict cutoff date can be a problem, in terms of
yeah, because I think the ocean photographer this year, they had a category winner in there that then got demoted because it had been awarded before. And that was sort of, way after the announcements and all the press coverage. But
they did have rules too. They have a rule that it shouldn't be happening, and obviously they they hadn't done their due diligence, unfortunately.
Well, it's very difficult because, to be honest, the sort of person who gets asked to be a competition judge isn't watching all the competition results through the year as keenly as the entrants. And that's been an issue ever since, I've been involved in underwater photography. All the entrants know exactly which pictures have been awarded for, and all the judges who tend to be a little older, a little more, less actively chomping at the bit at every competition result, are often a little bit more removed.
And well, for me anyway, the last point I wanted to make is, when you're entering competitions to images into any of these competitions, please get really familiar with the rules. I mean, obviously, Wildlife Photographer of the Year, you can't remove backscatter. I presume most entrants will know that, but I can remember the first year I entered, I did all my beautifully touched up all my images, took all the backscatter out, entered them, and then read the rules afterwards. And and it was, oh no, okay. So I mean, the other one that I see frequently on our competitions is people leaving watermarks on their images. Obviously, if you watermark the image and it's on there, it doesn't matter how beautiful the image is. It just gets automatically removed. It doesn't get judged. And making sure that you're setting things to the correct resolutions, whatever the competition requires. Making sure you're familiar with the rules and making sure your images with the rules.
In UPY, we have a picture must be taken after date.
Yep.
So we don't want 5-year-old images. Pictures have to be from the last 3 years. So it's about what's happening now, not what's happened in the past.
Yeah, I think we have the same as well. I need to check that, but we certainly haven't. So
but
I guess
the photographer doesn't. The wildlife photographer, you can enter pictures from 20 years ago if you want to.
Yeah. So I guess the moral of the story here is make sure that whatever, and it's confusing because, as we mentioned at the beginning, there's 3 major competitions all soliciting entries at pretty much the same time. It's very easy to get confused about which rule applies to which. So just make sure, pause for a minute, make sure that your images.
Well, it is your fault that your one is overlapping there, Adam. So
it is, yeah. It's my heart's fault actually.
Well, your heart's fault.
I have an excuse, but yeah. So yeah, it's.
Well, I think the message that we've got to is that it's not one size fits all.
No.
It's read the rules, understand the judges, understand the history of the competition, understand the judging process, and spread your favorite images across the contest because they are looking for different things. And if you've got a good reason why you think your picture suits that category, that competition, that's the one you should be trying to enter.
Yep. Go with what you feel. Yep. Excellent. Thank you, Alex. UPY is www.upy.com, is it?
No, it's Underwater Photographer of the Year, longhand.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's a pain for me every time I want to check something on the website. I've just typed Underwater Photographer of the Year.
To write an essay to get in there.
Yeah.
We're not much better. The masters is underwatercompetition.com. So actually kind of slightly shorter, but not a lot. So same sort of idea. You're going to have to
type underwater and then it's the next letter that will get you to either, if it's a P, you'll get prompted to us, and it's a C, you'll get prompted to you guys.
And then the wildlife photographer of the year, the easiest way is to Google it.
It's really hard actually, because there's I find it really hard to find their website because you very easily can get caught on the museum's website, which doesn't quickly take you to the wildlife photographer one.
Yeah. So whichever way, the best of luck to everybody that's entering. It's one of my favourite times of year because I get to see lots of beautiful images, and that's always a bonus.
I have to do my WPY entries before going away because the deadline is while I'm in the field. So I actually have to get my finger out and get on with them.
Oh, well, there we go. Well, we know what Alex will be doing for the next few nights then. Thanks very much, Alex. Wonderful as always. Thanks again to Aquatica for sponsoring this episode. We really appreciate the support. And thank you to all for watching. Please feel free to drop us a like if you enjoyed it, or to add any comments about the way you select your images for competitions. Thanks again. Look forward to seeing you soon.